This is the Horipad Steam Controller. When it was first announced a few months back, I was really hyped for it because the Steam Controller is one of my favorite controllers of all time. It certainly was not perfect, but it did so much that no other controller could do. And as somebody that prefers controller to mouse and keyboard, it was my go-to way to play games for years. When the Steam Deck came out, the Steam Controller was one of the reasons I was so excited for it. And man, did Valve deliver on that. But anytime I played games on a TV, I lost all of those controls that I loved about using the Steam Deck, especially since my Steam Controller has seen better days. So when Hori announced their version of a Steam Controller, I went to buy it immediately. Then they said, oh, I'm sorry, we're not shipping this to the United States. So I reached out to a friend of a friend that lives in Japan, and they bought one and shipped it to me. You can check out their YouTube channel over at Team Pandori. Big thanks to Emu Chicken for sending me the controller. So today, I want to take a look at my first impressions with the Horipad Steam Controller. First, let's check out what's in the box.
What's in the box?
So let's take a look and see what's inside this box. On the front, we've got our Steam logo, as well as, I don't know what that is. Down here on the bottom, we've got our Hori logo. And on the top, we've got our Steam logo and our Hori logo. On the back, we have a picture of both the front and the back of the device. It looks like it has Bluetooth and wired connectivity, which is that is good news, but the rest of this is lost on me because I don't speak Japanese. But let's go ahead and open up the box, see what's inside. And first thing, we've got these directions, and these are obviously going to be in Japanese because this is for Japan, and I can't read Japanese, so that's of no use to me. But here we've got the controller here in the box, and first off, we've got a dongle. Oh, this dongle actually has the Valve logo on it as well as the Hori logo on it. Let me zoom in. You can see right here, here's the Valve logo and the Hori logos on there. I'm assuming that this is for wireless, but maybe Bluetooth. I'm not sure which that is, if that's 2.4 gigahertz wireless. We'll find out shortly. Then got the controller, and underneath this we've got our USB-A to USB-C wire so that you can charge it, or so that you can connect it via a wire. All right, so now that I've got it in my hands, just looking over the controller, you can kind of feel on the back there's a different texture. In fact, if I flip it over, you can see the texture right there. It looks like, I don't know, bricks or something, or almost like a houndstooth, which feels different than this surface right here. A lot of controller companies are doing that these days. But back around to the front, let's compare these face buttons to the face buttons on, we'll say, the original Steam controller. So these buttons are much more rounded on the top. If I hold it like this and show it to you, you can see that these buttons are a lot more rounded on the top. They're also a lot smaller than the buttons over here. These buttons are much more flat on the top, which I appreciate, and they're also bigger and a little bit more spread out. Maybe I think they're more spread out. This to me feels better on my thumb than these. The small buttons on the original Steam controller was always something that I was not a fan of. Even though I love this controller, there was room for improvement here, and this controller definitely has improvement over that one when it comes to the face buttons. Obviously, the D-pad, the original Steam controller didn't have a D-pad, so this is an improvement over the original if you are somebody who really wanted to have a D-pad. This particular D-pad feels really soft. I'm very interested to see how this is going to perform when you're actually playing games, but it doesn't feel great. That's my initial impression of it. The sticks feel really smooth to rotate. So I don't know if this surface right here that I'm pointing at is going to wear off on the stick over time. That's something that obviously you'll never be able to find out in a first impressions video. I don't know if that, like, it feels smooth right now. We'll see how it holds up over time. The build quality feels very cheap. Let's see if it rattles. Okay, there is no rattling happening at all. This one, the original Steam controller, rattles like crazy. Here, listen. Moving on, we've got these buttons up here. This one, I'm assuming, is for pairing purposes if you are not using it wired. This is our quick access menu button, which is very similar to... Oh, it looks like I updated my software on my Steam Deck and I didn't even know it. It's the quick access menu button that's on your Steam Deck. We've got the same quick access menu button right here. Here we've got our view, our menu button from Xbox and our view menu from Xbox, or if you are an old person like myself, this start and select. All those buttons feel fine. When I saw this the first time, I thought that this was a button right here, but it's not. It's just a graphic. I'm assuming that's the logo for Hori. On the front, we have two macro buttons, which are labeled M1 and... Well, I'm having trouble seeing it. Let's zoom in. M1 and M2, I assume. It's very hard to see. Yeah, M2. So we've got M1 and M2 on the front. I don't know what those are going to do yet. These are incredibly clicky, like very, very loud and clicky. But I don't imagine you're going to be pushing these buttons all the time, so it doesn't really matter how loud those are. It's really more, are these loud? Let's take a look at the top. We've got our bumpers up here. The bumpers feel okay. I wish that they were a little bit more to the outside of it, because when I'm pressing this, well, here, let me zoom back out. When I'm holding it like you would when you're playing a game, like my fingers, I'm not going to, like, my fingers are going to sit like this most of the time. They're not going to be like that. And so I feel like when I'm pushing those buttons, I'm pushing those buttons with this part of my finger, and I could bring my fingers out like this to push them. That's not as comfortable. I don't think I like the placement of these bumpers. Clicking in the sticks feels fine. Feels like every other controller. That's fine. Then here you have your L4 and R4 buttons, and I have to say these feel really good when you flip it around. Your middle fingers, which those are the fingers I'm wiggling right there, those land right on those buttons, and they feel really good. I like the way that those feel, and I like their placement a lot. But first impressions are that this is kind of a mixed bag for this particular controller, and I was really hoping that I would be blown away by this thing, especially since I spent a bunch of money on it because I had to import it from Japan. But that being said, let's plug it into a computer and see what the hell is happening with this thing. In the black area near the D-pad and right stick is a small hidden screen that shows you your connection status on the left-hand side of that screen. It also shows you a Steam logo that shows when you are actually have the controller in Steam input mode, and that goes away when you put it in X input mode. On the right-hand side, it will tell you when you're charging. It'll be a solid lightning bolt when you plug it in. That lightning bolt will automatically go away when it is done charging. And if you're playing and it needs to be charged, that will start flashing at you. I will say that the back of the controller says that it has a 5,500 milliamp hour battery, and Hori says that it's going to get about 12 hours of use on that battery. But that, of course, is going to depend on what features you're using. As this is a first impressions video, I'll probably report back later on battery life after I've had more time with it, and that'll probably be on a future episode of the NerdNest podcast. Now, speaking of that battery, I tried to charge the battery using a few different USB cords, and none of them actually had any problem with it. It does come with a cord, which is great, but you can use whatever USB-C cord you happen to have laying around, and that's awesome. Moving on to the sticks, which, let's be honest, is the reason that you're buying this particular controller. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't know of another controller that has touch-sensitive sticks with the exception of the Steam Deck. If you're not a Steam Deck person, the capacitive sticks are what elevates the gyro experience on the Steam Deck over everything else, because the sticks have that capacitive cap on them. So the controller knows when you're actually touching the stick. This means you can easily reset your gyro position by taking your thumb off the stick, readjusting the controller, and then putting your thumb back down. You can fake this using stick deflection in Steam Input, but it isn't really a good experience, and every time that I've tried it, I've always ended up turning it right back off. It just doesn't work very well. And I'm somebody who has been a huge fan of gyro controls for games ever since the first Steam controller came out. If a first-person game, or a third-person game for that matter, if a shooter of some kind supports gyro, I'm way more likely to play it, because then you can get quick movements done with the stick, and then you can get really accurate aiming with the gyro. It's a super fantastic combination. If gyro is always on, I find myself turning it off or setting it to activate when I aim down sights using the left trigger. But with a capacitive thumbstick cap, I can just as easily leave it on all the time and reset it by removing my thumb for just a second. If every single controller adopted gyro and capacitive thumbsticks, I personally think controller players would be in a much better place than we are right now. All right, we'll get to the gyro, but first I want to talk more about the sticks. The caps on the sticks have a rougher texture around the outside, which means they're easier to grip. Overall, the tops feel kind of like the LCD Steam Deck sticks, which were very flat on top. I much prefer the feel of the sticks that are on the OLED Steam Deck, where they're just a little bit more concave of a feeling. With the capacitive pads are just a little bit lower than the rim, the outer rim of the stick. They move very smoothly and they're responsive. They also feel just about as stiff as an Xbox controller stick, less stiff than the original Steam controller, and a bit stiffer than the thumbsticks on my ROG Ally X.
Hey, what is that?
That's the ROG Ally X.
I know that. I'm talking about the case and the skin. They look great.
Oh, that's the KILLSWITCH case from DBRAND. They're the sponsors of this video. They have one for the Steam Deck, one for the ROG Ally, and now they have one for the ROG Ally X. It's probably the best way to protect your Ally X. They also make all kinds of different skins. These are the Area 51 skins, which just came out. I picked the yellow ones. They also have black and blue as options. The case has a nice textured, rounded handles that feel really grippy. You are not going to drop this handheld when it's wearing this skin. But if you did, it should be pretty well protected. The back has a built-in kickstand, and the kickstand even has a special hidden compartment so you can put micro SD cards in there. But my favorite part of the KILLSWITCH series is how the travel cover protects the entire system, including the joysticks and the triggers. It just makes it so easy to just throw in your bag without having to worry about your system getting damaged or putting it in another case. And because the case is always on, you don't have to carry an extra case to keep your handheld pristine. Be sure to check out the link in the description down below that like button and pick up your own DBRAND KILLSWITCH for your favorite handheld today. And if you get a skin, tell me which skin you picked in the comment section down below that like button. Okay, back to the controller. The combination of the capacitive sticks and the gyro are what make this a Steam controller for me. I heard of other people complaining that they had jittery gyro.
Jimmy legs.
Jimmy Leg.
Which coincidentally was my high school wrestling name, but I had no issues with that. I fired up Celico, which is a fantastic first-person shooter that has full support of Steam input, and I set gyro to on and to be activated by touching the right thumbstick, and everything felt incredibly smooth. It was like I was playing on the Steam Deck with really good and responsive gyro that I could adjust on the fly with those capacitive sticks. It is worth noting that the gyro won't work wirelessly if you are in X input mode, so if you're playing games outside of Steam and you want to use gyro, you will have to use it wired, and I think you'll also have to install software from Hori's website. I didn't want to install the software for a couple of reasons. Number one, I rarely play games that are not on Steam, and number two, the software is in Japanese and I don't read Japanese, so trying to navigate it was way more trouble than it would be worth, especially since we have such a fantastic experience just using Steam input instead. Like I said, that's what makes it a Steam controller for me. But what makes it not a Steam controller for me is the fact that it doesn't have trackpads. I have to admit, I don't use the trackpads on the Steam Deck nearly as much as I use them on the Steam controller, but when I want to use them, they are amazing to use. For me, most of the time I use them to make on-screen menus so I can, set a lot of different keybinds to a controller very easily. The trackpads are perfect for this, and the lack of trackpads would have been a big deal if not for how well Valve has designed Steam Input. Here, let me show you how you can still get virtual menus using the Horipad Steam Controller. Okay, so we're in Celico, and I'm going to hit the Steam button. It's going to bring up this menu. I'll arrow over with the D-pad to controller settings, and then I'm going to go to edit layout. The first thing that I need to do is create my virtual menu. So I'll come down to virtual menus on the bottom left, and I'll click add virtual menu right here. It's going to ask me to name it. I'll type subscribe. And then it's going to give me an option. Which kind of virtual menu do I want? Because the stick has a circular input, I'm going to pick Radial menu because it's going to make a menu that's in the shape of a circle. Now I'm going to click on the pencil icon, and I'm going to go into my commands, and I'm going to skip the first command. And the reason I want to skip the first command is going to make sense in a second. I'm going to add a command here so you can see this. Don't actually do this. I'll go ahead and do keyboard, and I'll say it's 9. And then I'm going to come down to the next one below, and I'm going to add a few more. So 1, 2, I'll just add 4 of them, 3, and 4. And as you can see, if you look on the bottom left, it shows 1, 2, 3, 4 around the outside, and then 9 in the middle. Because I'm not actually using a touch, like a touch sensitive device here, I'm going to come up here and get rid of that middle command because there's no way to activate that middle command from a joystick, as far as I know. If I'm wrong about that, feel free to let me know. So you're going to come over here to the gear, click on the gear, and then say remove command. And now if you look at the bottom left, you can see we've got our 4 commands. I want to customize these just a little bit, so I'm going to move down to the 1. It shows which one I have highlighted. I'm going to move over to this dotted line circle. And if I click on that, it's going to give me options. I'll go ahead and pick the pistol for that. Done. I'll pick the shotgun for this. Done. I'll pick the Uzi for this. And finally, I'll pick the assault rifle. And now we have our 4 weapons on there. If I come over here to general, it's set to touch release. I'm going to change that to continuous, and then show command glyph in tooltip. This tells you which button it's pressing. If you watch the screen as at the bottom left, as I turn this off, you'll see that the input command disappears. I don't really like having that on there, so I'm going to get rid of it. Over here on screen display, you can change where it is and how big it is. So I can crank it way up to be really large, or I can make it really small. I usually just stick with the defaults because it's fine. And then I'm going to come over to haptics. I'm going to turn the haptics off because this controller doesn't have any haptics. So now we've made our virtual menu. It's called subscribe. What do we want to do next? Well, the next thing I'm going to do is over on the left-hand side down at the bottom, I'm going to select an action set. And this is my default action set. If I come over to the gear icon and click it, I have 2 options. I can add an always on command or add a layer, and I'm going to add a layer. And we got to name that layer, so we'll call that like and subscribe, in case that wasn't heavy-handed enough for you. And now that we have that, if you hit the B button and back out of this, over here on the top left, you can see action set, and it's called default because that is the action set that I have set up right here, with a sub layer called like. So right now it's on default. If I hit the R1 button, it switches over to a different set of commands. So this allows you to put as many commands as you want, really, on your controller. It's friggin' amazing what Valve has done here. But what do I want to do? I'm going to stick with the default. I'm going to come up here to buttons. And earlier in the video, unless I edited it out, I said that I couldn't figure out what these M buttons were for. Well, I figured it out. They're right in here, and I kind of ignored them because it said back grips and they're on the front. So I guess I just didn't notice them. I'm going to pick the M1 button, which is the one that's on the left. I'm going to hit add command. Then I'm going to come over to action sets, and I'm going to call that hold action set layer. I'm going to click that. It's automatically going to pick the layer called like, because that's the only layer that I have. And it says display name when changed or beep when changed. First off, there's no speaker on this controller, so I'm going to turn that off. And display name when changed, I never see actually work. So I'm going to turn that off too. But now we've got it so that when I press that M1 button on the left-hand side of my controller, it's going to activate this layer called like. What do we do with that? Well, I'm going to go into my action set. I'm going to switch it over to, I'm going to hit R1 to switch over to like, and then I'm going to come down to my joysticks. And because I'm using the M1 button, which is on the left side of my controller, I'm going to come over here to my right joystick, and it says here it's inherited, meaning that it is picking up, it's going to have the same commands that were in the previous action set. So right now, my default action set, the right joystick is a joystick, and if I look, it's going to be doing it's going to activate the right joystick. We don't actually want that. So if I come over here, it says joystick inherited. I click on that, and I'm going to come down here, and it says subscribe, because that's what I named my virtual menu. So now that I've clicked that, if I close this by hitting the Steam button, and I hold down my M1 button and then tilt my right stick. Oh, it didn't work. Hold on. Did I pick the wrong thing? Oh, I just went through a little loading zone, so we got to wait. Okay. I did something wrong. Let me see if I can fix this. I found my problem. I set it to the left joystick. I want to set it to the right joystick. So the right joystick is now subscribe. So right joystick, subscribe. Let's close that. Hold down the M button, tilt the joystick, and you can see on the right hand side, as I move this around, it's switching to whatever input that I have. I currently only have 2 guns, so I can switch between those guns very easily by doing that. Okay, let's talk about the triggers, because these are the worst analog triggers I have ever used in my life. Here you can see that I'm playing Dirt 3, and I'm trying to pull the trigger as little as possible in order to get my RPMs to stay at right around 3. And I just can't do it. It goes down to 2 and then back up to 4. When I apply pressure to the trigger, I feel like I'm not pushing it at all. So if I try and push just a little bit more pressure, it just ends up fully depressed. It's like there's absolutely no middle ground at all, which is very disappointing. Even right out of the box, it's obvious that the triggers are horribly designed. Let's take a look at the triggers. The triggers, oh, good God. Okay, so this is very interesting. Look at that tiny little throw that these triggers get. That is real bad. Let's compare that to the original Steam controller. There's a lot more travel there on that, and let's take a look at that compared to a DualSense controller. Look at the amount of travel that you get on a DualSense controller, and then compare that to this. That is, quite frankly, pathetic. That's real bad. I'm not a fan of what Hori has done here, and I wish that Valve had pushed them a little bit more to make that better. That feels real bad. I'm not a fan of that. And the triggers, they don't have any kind of texture on them. They're very, very smooth. Again, these might be one of the worst triggers that I have ever used in my life. Flipping it over to the other side. On the other side, we obviously have our USB port so that we can charge. And here we have our triggers. Oh, no, wait a second. This says Steam X wired only. Now, I'm not sure what that means because, again, the instructions are in Japanese, so I can't read Japanese. I assumed that this was a trigger stop, and you would put it like that to stop these triggers so you could have digital inputs instead of analog inputs. Now, of course, these triggers, they have such a short throw. I don't know that matters all that much. Like, why would you even need a trigger stop when it's that short of a throw? But that surprised me. I thought that that's what we would have over here. So we'll find out later what this does. I'm not sure about this one. I'm guessing Maybe this is the trigger stop, because if you look, let me zoom in. If we look right here, I have this curve symbol, and then here I have more of a right angle symbol. This feels like it's probably analog, and then if I flip that over, becomes digital. But it's not a trigger stop like you would have on, say, the DualSense Edge or something like that. I think the triggers like this would be acceptable on, say, a Nintendo Switch, as that system doesn't really support analog triggers anyway. I can't see anyone using these triggers and thinking, oh, they're great. What's even worse is the controller has a switch on the back that toggles between analog triggers and digital triggers. And I've tried both, and gun to my head, I could not tell you which one I was using at any time. These triggers are flat out bad. The D-pad is a mixed bag as well. I don't like the way it feels. The corners feel like they're digging into your thumbs, especially in games where you would use it a lot. I can absolutely see it, feeling fatiguing after using it a long time, like in a fighting game. But it is an effective D-pad. I was able to pull off Hadoukens and Shoryukens. I was able to pull those off in Street Fighter 6 with absolutely no problem, and I always have trouble with them. I have about as much trouble as I do saying them. Here you can see the patent-pending Iron Meat test. What you do for this test is you press down on the D-pad and your guy will lay down, and then you rock the D-pad back and forth while pressing down to see if you get accidental inputs. Typically, I find D-pads that are good at Shoryukens and Hadoukens, they're bad at the Iron Meat test, and the inverse tends to be true as well.
I'm pretty sure that's just Retro Game Core's Contra test.
Well, it isn't. It's the Iron Meat test, and I've patented it, so I can sue other YouTubers that try and use it. I was hoping that this dongle was a 2.4 gigahertz dongle because I find those to be more reliable than Bluetooth, and as I have multiple computers, I prefer a 2.4 gigahertz dongle. That way I can plug it into my hub, and then when I switch to a different laptop, everything just connects without me really having to switch anything manually. But this is just if you're playing on a computer that doesn't have a Bluetooth dongle. I will say that pairing works fine unless you're trying to pair to multiple devices. I paired my laptop, no problem, and then I paired it to my Steam Deck, no problem, and then I paired it to my Ally X, no problem. But then when I went back to the laptop, I had to go through all of the nonsense of deleting the controller from Windows and then repairing it like 5 times before it would actually work. I friggin' hate Bluetooth. Anyway, I hate Bluetooth, but I don't hate it more than wires. I very much prefer not having wires. This controller comes with a wire. It's pretty long, which is nice, but I hate wires. So that thing can pound salt. Get out of here, wire. Nobody wants you here. Let's talk about the extra buttons. On the back, we have the paddles that are positioned perfectly. I really like how they feel, and I can see myself using these ones all the time. I don't think I've ever activated them by accident, and I have no notes on these buttons. Hori, good job here. If you tell me I have one feature that needs to be removed from a controller, I will always say, take the rumble, I don't need it. But then I'm going to follow up with a question. I'm going to ask you, why are you asking me that question? Why don't you want to put all of the features in? I get that you can save costs by not putting features in, but I want all the features. Do I want gyro more than I want rumble? Yes. Do I want wireless more than I want rumble? Absolutely. But I still want rumble. It's strange that Valve seems to have some kind of weird aversion to good rumble. The Steam Controller's rumble was faked through haptics and through the trackpads. The haptics were great, but that's not a good substitute for rumble. And then they did the exact same thing with the Steam Deck. No real rumble. Now, I know that the Horipad Steam Controller is not made by Valve. They did not make this thing. So why are we not getting rumble? I'm not talking about HD rumble or that crazy shit that Sony's doing with the PS with the DualSense. Just regular ass rumble that's been around for decades. Why cheap out there? Anyway, moving on. Honestly, this controller is a bit of a mixed bag. Let's talk about what I like and what I don't like about it. I like the D-pad for accuracy. The sticks are really good and the ergonomics are spot on. It has capacitive sticks that, those are the standout feature when you combine them with gyro, and the gyro's great. The face buttons are nice and wide and flat and spread out, which I personally like, and I like the little screen over having small lights to tell you connection status and charging status. What I don't like, the D-pad will get fatiguing over time. It's really uncomfortable to use. The triggers might be the worst analog triggers that I have ever used with their non-existent throw. It is baffling to me that they didn't include rumble, and it feels really lightweight and cheap thanks to its minuscule 550 milliamp hour battery. I don't know that I can recommend this controller to anyone, even though it has that one feature that I really, really like. If Valve is going to continue to partner with third-party manufacturers to make Steam controllers, I really hope that we see something from 8BitDo. They have much better build quality, and they'll actually ship to the US. So, what do you all think about the Horipad Steam Controller? And what features do you want in a controller? Let me know in the comment section down below, or hit me up on social media. From the NerdNest, I'm Bill. Stay rad, everyone. And Shoryukins.